Hello, Booktube. It is day 6 of Vlogmas, and I'm coming to you with a two-part thing. I'm going to do Friday Reads, because I've never done a Friday Reads before, and it's Vlogmas, so I might as well try that. And at the end, I'm going to talk about the École Polytechnique Massacre. It's the 30th year anniversary. That's something you're not particularly up to hearing some clueless dude talk about. Feel free to click away, but yeah, that's just my little kind of heads up at the beginning. So yeah, I'm going to start off with Friday Reads, where apparently booktubers talk all about the books they're going to read this weekend, which I'm going to read the same books that I probably was reading last weekend, this weekend, and the next weekend. So maybe my next Friday Reads will be just an update video on how those books are going. Let's start off with the first and biggest book, the one that I will most definitely be reading for the next little while, which is Thomas Cromwell, Revolutionary Life by Diarmaid MacCulloch. It's a 2018 book all about Thomas Cromwell, Chief Minister to Henry VIII, helped him get his marriage to Queen Catherine annulled, a marriage that went on from 1509 to 1533, so it takes a little bit of balls to say, oh, I'm going to get that marriage. That marriage never happened, honey. We've been married for, 20 whatever more years, and it's like, oh, no, that didn't count, and Henry is having a little trouble getting the Pope to agree to that, and indeed Cromwell, in the process of where I'm in the book, in the 20% part, is doing the work around. He's also pushing his own kind of his own campaign, his own zeal of kind of evangelical Reformation kind of reforms to the church, which results in the Church of England split away from the Roman Catholic Church, and is all a part of the Reformation. We have Martin Luther kicking around, who also thought that Henry VIII was a bit of a sleazeball for trying to get his marriage annulled, so he wasn't actually a big ally of him there. I'm really enjoying the book. I really enjoy having a good historian kind of talking about how, well, you know what, we don't actually have the greatest information, or where we have dearths of information about Thomas Cromwell. I mean, you go with, this is Cromwell, born in 1485 to 1540. So, the amount of surviving information that we have, just in general, even of the most famous people, can be spotty at times. This is 20% into the book, and we're already well past his youth and all that stuff. Like, when he was a nobody, and there's very little. It's hard to get records. The thing. There's also just the thing of, with him as a statesman. My little doodle is hacking up a fur ball somewhere in there. Oh, poor Shira. Okay. Yeah, it's like he's got, within his papers, he's got his in tray of all the letters that have come into him, and like they seem to have a good collection of that. But for whatever reason, the out tray, all his letters going out, which usually someone of his status would have kept copies of, they're for the most part not there. So it makes for a bit of a blank slate, something that you have to kind of reconstruct and kind of figure out what's going on, which obviously has made for it's a good opportunity for people that were against him to kind of demonize and vilify him. And I mean, he basically pulled down a lot of the kind of the Catholic infrastructure that was in England. So there is a lot of people, especially probably represented by the people who are really were for Thomas More, his main kind of seen as, at least symbolically, one of the main opposers to Henry VIII's campaign and Cromwell's campaign, and that did not end well for Thomas More. And indeed, by the end of the book, it's not going to, at the end, it doesn't end well for Thomas Cromwell, I'm going to surmise. Now, why I'm reading this is because of Hilary Mantel, and more specifically because of Jason at Old Blues Chapter and Verse, and his now just recently announced CROMWELLATHON, where they are going to be reading the books of Hilary Mantel, her books on Thomas Cromwell at Wolf Hall, Bring Up the Bodies, and the final one, which is coming out in March, which is Shadow and Light. So January it's going to be Wolf Hall, February it's going to be Bring Up the Bodies, and then March, I assume it's as long as it's coming out, and a pristine Canadian copy for Jason, because he apparently likes the Canadian cover of the book. We'll be reading each one of those. I'll see how far I get through. I'm actually reading this biography of Cromwell because there were some ways I was dissatisfied with the book, and I'm not quite sure if that was just my kind of naivete at the time of just going like, well, this is so different from anything else I'd heard about Thomas Cromwell. It's like, well, obviously this, Mantel, who is an author I really love, is really got kind of she's got her own agenda there. Now, of course, everybody has their own agenda when it comes to stuff like that. So it's good to, I'm interested in reading this book, which has probably got a lot more about the sewers and weirs, straightening the waterways and radically altering the geography, cumulatively radically altering the geography of southern England of the time so that they can have better passage and better financial stuff. That kind of stuff, for some reason, interests me, and his political maneuverings. I'm really enjoying this, but I'm hoping it'll make a good basis for participating in. We'll see how much of the readathon of this, because I read the first book, Wolf Hall, and I read it and I was like, it's okay. And I never actually went on and read Bring Up the Bodies. For some reason, it just didn't have enough there for me. So, and I had enough questions that, so I want to give it another try. I think Jason's enthusiasm has spurred me on to that, and enough that I'm reading a biography of Thomas Cromwell, and I'm really enjoying that. MacCulloch is a really interesting historian there that way, and it's obviously very knowledgeable, and I think he's written apparently on the Reformation itself. So he's got a really great background and is bringing a lot of the context to life, which I'm really enjoying. Oh God, yeah, this is going to be just a long video. Screw it. I'm just going to go well past 10 minutes. The second book I'm reading, it also has a BookTube connection. Here, let's put that one down then. Steve Partridge was talking about on his channel, on one of his recent videos, about reading the Calculating Stars by Mary Robinette Kowal, which he was alternately cringing over the bad sex scenes, which apparently were using kind of, rather kind of juvenile kind of sex metaphors like rockets launching and take off and all that stuff. A bit of kind of it's kind of a 50s science fiction apocalyptic thing. So there's some maybe rather blunt use of blunt depictions of sexism that were a little bit kind of hammer over the head, but he thought it was actually also quite subtle and quite good on stuff like kind of racism of the time. So, but that brought me into mind because I picked up the longest time ago in kind of a library sale, The Shades of Milk and Honey, which is Kowal's debut novel, which is it's a Jane Austen pastiche with a fantastical element in it. In the book, there is this magic called glamour, which is basically you're able to cast illusions, make illusions, and make sounds as well. And it's seen as a suitable pastime for a young lady, along with music and what is it? Music and dancing and doing art, which are the suitable pastimes for a young lady to make her more marriageable to a young man. This being that kind of time of England where that kind of class of women were just horribly cloistered in this kind of dystopian monster world, which is like, God, it's like, and you have all these women who seem to be kind of completely neurotic and crazy, and it's like, no wonder. It's like, this is fucking nightmare world. Well, at least that's my Jane Austen. It's a horror. She writes horror books, right? Yeah, I'm quite correct on that. Well, and thank you for Claudia at Spinster's Library for however distorted knowledge I have of that idea of these are suitable pursuits for women to make them more marriageable. And once you get married, of course you don't need to do it anymore because you've landed your husband. At least that's my rough understanding of it. So this book is very much it's very much written as a Jane Austen novel. Positive on this, Steve, is that because it's a Jane Austen novel, there certainly isn't going to be any sex, and isn't going to be any horribly awkward metaphors for sex. Maybe it's a time period that Kowal feels particularly comfortable about, because it's we're getting kind of all that courtship and who does she loves, and we have a heroine who is smart, is maybe a little bit on the proud side, but and can't understand that there's some guys who are like totally into her, but of course they couldn't be into me. They're into my beautiful swan-like younger sister who though is totally beautiful, is also kind of has no artistic or kind of that much in the way of smarts up there. But so I'm enjoying it, and nothing much is happening. It is a Jane Austen. It is very much kind of a Jane Austen takeoff. It's basically when will she figure out that the handsome, glamorous, professional glamorous guy is the one who's actually totally into her? When are they gonna get together? This is apparently the first book in a series, so there might also be that of we're gonna kind of keep it very small scale for this one, and maybe the books going forward will maybe expand in scope. This is very much like in that stultifying horror world of a Jane Austen novel where all the women are trapped in these little things and can't do anything and can only... Okay, well, that's my editorializing. Strangely enough, it made me think of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke, which is Jane Austen, but it's Jane Austen and Charles Dickens, and it's got more to do with kind of men in that society, also sort of set in that society, but mixed with magic as well. Though that is a strange and bizarre book, crammed full of massive tons of descriptions and side stories and tons of footnotes. I remember enjoying it quite a bit at the time. I can't remember much of it. I would actually I'll put a link down below to Joe Swagman, who just did a review of it, which I think was a fairly clear-eyed review of it, saying like, it might not be worth your time unless you're really into this sort of thing. I really remember enjoying it at the time, but it was a slog, and there were some parts at the very end it was just like the last 100 or 2 pages, just like, wow, this got really bizarre. So yeah, that's I'm enjoying it at the moment. It's a nice kind of a light thing. I don't know if I will go on to the second one of this. If it fell into my lap, if I found it at a library sale, whatever the next one is at a library sale, I might pick it up. Yeah, so it's a nice passing the time kind of a book. God, yes, we're just gonna go for it. Now, at the end here, I've done something which I've been really thinking about because, okay, here's the thing. I read Balzac's Cousin Bette, and it's Brian at Bookish's favorite book, and I think we were talking about it because it's like, oh well, what books do you have? And it's like, oh, I have Cousin Bette and I have Cousin Pons, and it's like, oh, I've read Cousin Bette and I really love that book, yeah, maybe you could read that and then we could read Cousin Pons together or something like that. This was a long time ago, and that we had this conversation. I doubt if Brian remembers, but I read Cousin Bette and I did a review of Cousin Bette where I sort of semi lost my mind on that book. It was a beautifully written book. I really hated the good character in it, good characters in it, which totally overbalanced the book for me. I think Brian, I could characterize that Brian he found that some of the good characters, especially the main female character in that book, was noble, and I found her a complete imbecile saint, kind of imbecile dolt. God, I want to just tear my hair out. Obviously I did. So that really overbalanced the book for me, and I found it really nihilistic. He's just announced he's doing a buddy read with he's going to do a buddy read with Sonia at an Enthusiastic Reader and Dan at the Weird Book Club. They're going to do a buddy read of Cousin Pons, which I still have my copy of, and it's one of these things of, even when I finished Cousin Bette, I was sort of like, it's the first half. it's like the first half. It's described by Balzac as, I guess, a diptych of the poor relations kind of thing, of Cousin Bet being kind of the female side, and Cousin Pons is the male poor relation. And there's a part of me that really wants to try. And what I've done is I'm not going to actually read it, but I've listened to so far an extremely great recording of it from LibriVox, a free service, so not any change. And I've been listening to that, and I've been enjoying it, which I really enjoyed the beginning of Cousin Bet as well. It's beautifully written, carefully observed. Balzac does have a tendency to kind of say, oh, well, you're this type, so therefore this, which can get kind of racist when he's talking about, like, oh, if you're a Pole, then, well, the Poles are very emotional, and it's like, that's clangy. But he's also got some beautiful writing. He's interesting. Like, he's Cousin Pons is a glutton. So I'm gonna continue reading it. I don't know if I'll impose myself on. I think Brian's hosting a Voxer group. I don't know if you want me bitching all the way through your read. That might be things. So I might just kind of pop up with my own little observations, or I might just report back that I stopped reading it and was kind to myself and kind to others on the internet. But for whatever reason, I really liked The Wild Ass's Skin by him a long time ago. And I don't know if that's a mistake. I can see that in the right areas, Balzac and I might get along quite well. We just really did not get along well with Cousin Bet. So yes, that is all my Friday reads. So yeah, and then I'd just like to talk about at the end, because it is December 6th, that in 1989, a gunman entered the École Polytechnique in Montreal. It was a mechanical engineering class. He separated the men from the women. There was like 9 women in this large class with a whole ton of men. Ordered the men out, and then he shot all those women. Killed, I believe, 6 of them, and then roamed the hallways of that school for the next 20 minutes, targeting women specifically, ending up killing 14 women, wounding another 10 women, and also wounding another 4 men as well. And it's one of these kind of events in Canadian history, which I always remember. A lot of those students were about my age, and I was, growing up at the time. This was something that really impacted, I think, everyone. I know it impacted me. My Jaja, my wife, worked. I probably was working at the time at a sexual assault center, and so it kind of her experience of that and what she told me about that kind of really opened my eyes to a lot of the the violence against women in our country, in Canada. And as much as there are debates about, oh, he was just a lone gunman, this isn't all men. It's like, this gunman who was a young man himself, had failed to get into École Polytechnique. He had applied twice and had failed to get in. He represents sort of a spectrum of how women. He represents how women are treated in Canadian society, and the violence that happens every day. Not to just with madmen with guns who shoot multiple people. This is a lot of the violence that happens towards women is going to happen to them by their partners, by the people closest to them, which is an uncomfortable truth. But it's something. This is the so I dropped my piece of paper because what today is now called is the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women. Yeah. So it's a kind of it's a day. It's like it's been kicked off by it is inspired by what happened in Montreal 30 years ago. But it's something that happens, unfortunately, every day, you know, on a much smaller scale, and is not reported. Yeah, and I mean, I guess it's one of these things that comes around every year, and I always think about that. Yeah, and you know, it's something I would like to remember, something that I hope I take action on my own stuff every day. It's definitely a part. It's something that is something that has shaped me as a man, and I hope it's something that will and I hope it's something that will eventually, slowly but surely, change our society, because it needs to change. And you know, I think about 30 years ago and what our culture was like then. There are some ways it's gotten better, and some ways it's gotten worse. Some ways I look at that gunman who was I hate women, and you know, they're getting in my way. They're taking away my opportunities. Unfortunately, something has only gotten louder. Which is something that really sucks. But that's something I think that needs to be discussed, and you need to get emotional about stuff like that. So yeah, that's all I want to say about that. I will see you tomorrow with another video. Yeah, another video. All right, more videos later.